I would describe my image-based practice as being one of based in citation or based on citation. Throughout my most recent body of work, I've been engaging with the vast number of images and objects from my grandmother's personal archive to further understand the ways in which the black femme is responsible in so many ways of preserving history. And through my citational practice, I then try to understand the role that I then play in this preservation. And through this act of citation, I'm actively thinking about how I can like decolonize my practice and not look to white Western ways of making or preserving even images, and looking to the women in my family as a barometer of um, how to make images, when to make images, and then how to preserve them. There are elements of feelings that happen to reveal themselves as I'm making that I think are important, um, particularly when I'm working with um, these personal images from my grandmother's archive, or when I'm making self-portraits, or like work, like all the feelings that come from that, I think are what makes the work important. It's this feeling of not only being seen by oneself, but also, the ability to be seen by others. And there's this like relationship that I have with these objects that I think ultimately empower me or make me feel embodied in a very specific way. That I don't go into the practice of making, or I don't go into my art making practice with, but I think through my art making practice, I actually am able to engage with these feelings. My understanding of the archive, and the way that my work engages with this understanding, is that the archive itself is like fluid and living. It's not as fixed as we often assume it to be. And I like to display that within my work or my practice. In the piece that's in the exhibition, you have this elongated photograph of my grandmother and her two sisters at my great aunt's wedding. And in that photo, the elongation comes from the act of me like dragging it as it's being scanned and holding onto it, therefore like changing the way it's rendered for others to see it. And something about that elongated process elicits or like um, brings to mind like this idea that the archive is something that's ever growing, ever changing. It's fluid, and I think that ultimately is what I think about the archive, especially as it pertains to like these things that exist well beyond us, and how the meaning of them changes. Especially objects like images that tend to weather over time, who they've been like in multiple different hands. And so I think about that when I'm thinking about the archive, and I think that's what's most exciting about it. Is that it's this thing that will continue to live on well beyond any of our own existences, and um, yeah, I'm interested in showing that within my work. For a very long time, I probably would have said that when asked about the promised land, I would have probably like talked about a very specific geographic space. But in this moment, and now knowing what I know about the world that we exist in, I don't believe that there is a physical space that offers the promise that our grandparents and those that came before them were seeking. Instead, I believe that the promised land really exists within the body itself. And to be clear, I'm speaking specifically about the black body. I believe the promise comes from the very fact that our existence or rather are surviving within a body like this is a very radical act. And so I only have, you know, the ancestors or my ancestors to attribute to my own existence. And although they existed on many different geographic locations, their tenacity is the promise that I think I was offered, and that's something that I fully want to embody, and that's something that I want my work to display.